here today, so I'm going to guide you through our slide deck and also through the demo on my own. Okay, so what is the agenda for today? First, I'm going to give a little motivation and some examples for data leak analysis, and also some examples for data leaks which went public. From that, we are going to derive the requirements which we saw at our customers and give you a little explanation on that. Then we talk about our approach for how to search for possible data leaks within your systems. Then we're going to have an overview on the project steps, and finally we're going to conclude with a system demo and also discuss a little on how to proceed with the outcome of that system demo. Okay, so let's start with the motivation. First, when I talk about the we in this presentation, I'm going to give you an overview of a project which we executed a couple of times in similar ways already in cooperation between KPMG here in Germany and Virtual Forge, and also allow me to set a little the scope of our webinar. On the one hand, of course, what kind of systems do we talk about? At Virtual Forge, we are especially focused on SAP systems. So in scope for our talk today is any kind of SAP system based on an ABAP NetWeaver stack. So that's one part of our scope. And also brief idea of what do we understand as a data leak and what are we not talking about. So we're not talking about a thing which I would call data loss, where for example, the database crashes and the complete set of information is lost and not accessible anymore, and you need to restore a backup. So that's not our topic for today, but we want to talk about data leaks, which is more the unauthorized way to access sensitive data and find then ways of data flows in which this data might leave the surrounding of the SAP system. So here's some idea on risks, and also from that derived then the motivation of why should we deal with such a topic. So for example, entry point for a data leak analysis could be some legal requirements, and stated here on that slide are some regulations which might be coming from the EU, or in Germany we also have federal laws which force us to deal with these topics. You also see some examples of the sensitive data, so which is the data in the SAP system which needs to be protected in a special way. Of course, this varies very strongly depending on the type of system which you have. So, of course, in an HR system, it's different data than in a manufacturing system, and of course also to the type of company you're talking with. So of course, a pharmaceutical company has different data which needs to be protected than, for example, a bank. You see some of the examples in here. As I said, HR systems, most of the corporations do have that, and in that we have personal related data. So, for example, taken from your employees, their bank account information, their salary information, or, for example, the religion they belong to. When you are a manufacturing company, you don't want to have your prices or calculations being brought out of the system and then perhaps getting into the hands of your competitors. We have customer data and bank accounts. Of course, this might lead to a tremendous loss in reputation if it's getting public that someone took away from your system, for example, the complete set of your customer accounts. So this leads us to the bottom line, where we have the implication. So of course there's loss of reputation, which is then harder to put into any financial numbers. But of course it might also have an internal effect. If salary data is made public within your colleagues, and you're the one with the lowest salary, might even reduce your motivation or force you to leave your company. Perhaps you lose deals if your competitors know what your prices will be, and they will be just cheaper than you are. But also we have, again, if we go to the legal requirements and the legal sanctions which might follow, you see here some numbers which can come up if you violate the legal requirements stated in the top area. Okay, and as I said, I wanted to give you some examples. So I'm sorry, some of these are in German, but also some examples here in English. So on the left hand we see, from what I know, the biggest data breach that we recorded when it comes to user accounts, where Yahoo was once hacked and user account or customer information was downloaded from Yahoo. Another prominent example which explains very nicely the idea which we have behind the data leak analysis is that one on the top right here. So the topic here is that some federal German organizations, they purchased tax data from Swiss banks, and the information contained financial details of German citizens who brought their money into Swiss banks without paying taxes. Now imagine that this data was taken from an SAP system, and you're the responsible security officer for that SAP system. Well, then your job is that you need to make sure that no one of your employees has unauthorized access to the details of that system and can download the data and create such a CD and sell it somewhere else in the world. So that's the one of the prominent examples where such a data leak analysis could get into place. So far on the motivation, so now let's go a little more into details and derive the requirements. So what do you need to do if you want to pursue on such a data loss analysis? Okay, and here we have, I'm not going too detailed into the techniques in here, but the picture is showing that any kind of SAP system is basically running on a database system, and this database system, as it's shown here, consists of various single tables, and in these tables we store our data. So also, of course, the sensitive or to be protected data. And then we have applications and interfaces which work on these tables, so they write the data into these tables, and also, of course, pull the data out of these tables and bring them out of the context of the database tables into another context. As you see here, for example, they display it on the screen, they print it on any device, bring it somewhere else to another application system or any kind of subsystem. What we notice when we work with our customers, we also have our CodeProfiler code security benchmark, and it's showing that the average ERP system has more than 2 million lines of custom source code. So over the time, the amount of application that is available for end users in the SAP systems increases dramatically. So if we want to now make sure that the sensitive data which is stored in the table is protected properly, then we need to find all the places in the code where the data is processed, and from there on in which context it is brought. And here, as it says, it's required to determine which data is processed, so where is my critical data processed, and in which context is it brought, so is it printed on the screen, is it printed on paper, is it brought somewhere else to another application system, and are all these spots protected with authorizations so that no unauthorized access takes place. So that's the thing which you need to investigate. Now, how do we proceed when we go on into such a project? And again, as I said, we're talking about the we. It's typically a joint effort between colleagues from KPMG in Germany and also we from Virtual Forge, where we bring our tool, the CodeProfiler. So you see here our approach basically consists of 3 steps, while in focus for today's talk is mainly step number 2, where I'm going to elaborate on usage on the CodeProfiler, also it's a live demo. Typically we start by getting an overview on the authorizations and access mechanisms in that system which we investigate. We call this here the central system. So that's the system in scope. So find out with additional tools on roles and authorizations, on users and stuff. Part of this investigation is that we, together with the customer, determine which are the reports that we know of and which are the sensitive data fields to be processed into these reports. So basically you could say that's the scope which we really require to have it covered in our custom code or in the applications that we give to our end users. So next step in this procedure is we are doing a tool-based analysis where we identify data flows where our critical sensitive data is accessed and then brought out of the context of the SAP system into one of the other contexts, as you see here. And I'm going to give you also examples for other contexts which we search for as well. And step number 3, as you see here on the right side, is if we identify that the data is brought into any kind of other application or any other subsystem, well, consequently, yeah, then you could say, well, I need to proceed from there as well. So simplest example would be data is read from my system in scope, but brought to another system with simply a remote function call, an RFC call, and from the other SAP system, I need to follow up on that stuff. Okay, so let's get a little more into detail. How does the processing of step 1 and 2, of which steps does it consist? First, we start with some activities. On the left hand, we see there are application-specific activities, and here, of course, the colleagues from KPMG come into play because they simply know more about legal requirements, or they can help us to get through corporate guidelines and derive also the business requirements. Outcome of these activities is the definition, what is sensitive data. And important here, this is still not in a technical language, but in a business language. So we define sensitive data would be credit card numbers, or, for example, bank account information, or if we talk about HR, the salary field information, or social security numbers. Let's see sensitive data. Then we have on the right hand side IT activities, which means we need to translate these keywords from a business language into the technical language, which helps us later to identify exactly the right places where these fields are stored in database tables. So this is basically then done by virtual forge. So coming back to the example from a credit card number, we search for the data elements which are relevant for a credit card number, and you see fields like they're called CC num, so that's a technical information. And this is required to put it as a parameter into the data leak prevention analysis of CodeProfiler. And then we can let our tool run. I'm going to show you this in a second in the live demo as well. The output of the tool is we get a list of the data flows which show us which critical data is accessed by which piece of custom ABAP code, and also to what kind of leakage type is it brought. So examples you've seen on the slide before, like is it printed, is it displayed on the screen, is it brought into some other application context. And as I said, I'm going to give you more examples in a second. And based on these data flows, we can then start into what I would call a variance analysis. So I can compare all the found data flows for the sensitive data with what I expected that is there. And I'm going to give you a simple example for this variance analysis in a second. Well, the advantage is, of course, that we can use our code scan and find these data flows very, very quickly in comparison to what would you need to do if you don't have a tool. Well, then you need to go through the 2 million lines of source code which you have on average and search through it manually. And still then you don't have the correct identification of the data flows, so there's a lot of clicking and doing where you search if you need to do this manually. So biggest advantage is you get the good details for your further investigation very, very quickly. Okay, so here's the example of that variance analysis. So we start on the left hand with the requirement, where, for example, we say our HR department, they have the requirement to have a report which is writing a birthday list. And on that list should be just the names and the date of birth. So this one could be printed, for example, and then pinned to a pinboard in the coffee corner, so everyone can check if someone is going to have his birthday in the couple of next days. Now we start into our data leak project, and together with our customer we define a list of sensitive data. And let's assume on this list of sensitive data, for example, if we work together with the Workers' Council in here and the HR responsible, so we put, of course, any data element which is personal related on it. And so we put the names on that list, we put the date of birth also on it, and we continue with salary, or in this example, social security number information. So that's the second column in here. And as you see, this is still application business speak. What we do as a next step, we transfer this into the technical representation. So we search for data elements which match these criteria in here, from the application to the data element. So you see social security number is translated to RV-Num, so in German it would be Rentenversicherungsnummer. Okay, and then we are ready to let our tool run, the CodeProfiler run, and we get scan results. And it will tell us, well, I see that there's a report, and it has read access to the following data fields, and it will put it onto a write list. Now you see here that the result also says that the RV num field is printed. And we do our cross-check and see, well, actually only the first 3 fields are really required from the business point of view, and the output of the social security number is not required. I need to do something about this report, either perhaps change the source code not to output the social security number, or perhaps I need to rework authorizations that it's not accessible by the amount of users which currently can access it. I'm going to get to the point of mitigation later on as well. Okay. Yeah. So again, a quick overview on the project steps before we get into the live demo. So you see here we're running through a phase of the preparation, then we run the tool. We do afterwards an analysis phase and some sort of post-processing. So when we start the project, we have our requirement phase. Here we work typically together with, for example, colleagues from HR departments, or for example with workers' councils, in order to make sure that we get the right fields determined. Once we have the list ready, our requirements catalog ready, we can build the list of our sensitive data and also do that translation step where we transfer the fields from the functional terms into the technical terms. We put this into the tool as a piece of configuration. It can be done very simply. I'm going to show it in the system. Then we run our source code scans and we get a list of all data flows for the sensitive data. And then we do our variance analysis in step 4. We compare the source code scan results with the predefined requirements of the first step. And for those where we see variations, where we see that too much sensitive data is getting out of the system, we provide a suitable proposal as well. You'll see that we have the option also to get into a stay clean process and go for continuous monitoring. So the idea is once we have identified the deviations from our standard, cleaned it up, and we know all of the data flows, we accept the system as it is, and say, okay, we have everything under control, and we go just keep on scanning and look out for new data flows and getting alerts on potential new data leaks. So much on the project steps. And now let's get into the system demo. What do I want to show you? First, very quick view, because it's very simple. How do we configure these data leak prevention tests? It's just a step in the IMG of CodeProfiler, and then we're going to have a CodeProfiler scan. I'm going to show you how the results look like. Okay, now let's switch into the SAP system, and we're going to start with a simple demo of the programs which I prepared for our use case here. Actually, I do not need to show you the source code because it's very simple. The example is taken from the SAP training application, which most of you might know. So we're dealing with flights, planes, connections, and also the bookings on these flight connections. So anyone who was ever in a training at SAP knows these tables like sFlight and sCon and so on. And I'm showing you a program. So that's my first program. If I execute this, you see that simply customer information from this demo application is read and printed on the screen. But the program also does something else. It's putting the exact same piece of information also into a file, just opening it and putting it up here, and writing that file into a network share as you see here. So from here I could now of course take it and process it or whatever the data is, and I can further work on it. So that's my first program. I'm going to scan later on, and I want to show you that we can find DLP findings in there. And the second one is this one here. It's basically doing the same again, reading from that database table as custom, and not sending it with into a file on a share, but also I can put the information into an email and let the SAP system send that email. So now I have my Outlook not here, but as you see here in the source transaction, the email would look like this. So these are the two demo programs, and as I said, I'm accessing customer data in this table. Now let's assume we did our first phases where we identified that the critical information, the sensitive information which we want to protect, is a telephone number. And as you might have seen, the telephone number is a piece of output, from program as a piece of output that we have in my programs. So I want to find that these programs do an output of the telephone number. The information which I need to have to configure CodeProfiler is the data element which is used in the corresponding database tables. So you see here, transparent table is called sCustom, contains the information on our customers, and if I want to search for the phone number, I need to identify this data element s_phone number. Okay, so this would be the piece of configuration which I need to put into the CodeProfiler customizer. And as I said, I'm going to show you how this is done. So I just open the IMG for CodeProfiler, go into the folder test case configuration, and here is define data loss prevention. Okay, and as you see here, I already prepared this. I just need to add s_phone number onto that list, and now I'm ready to scan my custom code for data leakages concerning this phone number. And in the top area you see that there is also some other fields which come pre-delivered. They are mainly taken from the HR module, but also some technical critical information which you don't want to have leaked, like password hashes, can be put onto that list, and that's what we ship as a standard value. Now let's do our CodeProfiler scan. So what do I need to put in? I'm going to scan my complete package of demo code. Then as a test case group, I need to specify that I want to run the data leak prevention tests. And here I need to give a scenario, and that's basically it. Okay, so let this run. Now what happens is that the source code of that package, that VF_SES, is sent to our CodeProfiler scanner. It identifies all places in the SAP code where a database table is accessed, and also fetches the columns which are part of this database access. Then we compare it with our configured list of critical data, and once we see that a column is red where the data element matches our configuration list, it will further pursue on the data flow. So in which variable is the information from the database table loaded, and from there is it brought to some endpoint which we call leakage type in this context. And you see here that my package is now scanned, and it shows me that we have 18 findings for the disclosure of critical database content test case is here. So I'm going to drill down into more details. You see I've loaded the 18 test cases here into my middle section of the CodeProfiler Finding Manager. I have the object name and the program unit name, so I can identify exactly in which piece of ABAP code is the leak being located. For our environment, we have these 5 columns here to the right. They're very important because they now help me to identify exactly what data is leaked and how is it leaked. So, for example, I'm going to go to this column and sort it by the data element name, and you see here that we have 4 findings for s_phone numbers. That's the data element which I just placed on my my configuration list. So that's the data element which was hit, and here I see from which table was it read. And you see it's s_custom telephone, so that's the name of the table and the name of the column. Now I have here the leakage type. You see that I have 2 times the write access. Of course, both programs which we were using did a write list output, and the other leakage types which we have is, on the one hand, leakage type is file. You've seen that I've created a file in my file share folder, and the other leakage type was sending it via email. Okay, so that's basically now the definition of the data flow. As I said, this is now the input material for the next phases which we had in our procedure. Okay. Now we need to go through these findings and do the variance check. Are all the data flows which are reported in here on the list of expected data flows? Okay. Just going one step back on that. So now we've seen the live demo for the detection part. Run the CodeProfiler scans, and you've seen the list of the sensitive data. Now we say that we have to compare it with a list of the predefined requirements, which of course in my demo I did not have ready, but in the project we have. And finally we do our proposal, where we can create a result report per data flow, proposing some activities for mitigation. Okay, so now let me give you some examples for the mitigation which might be suitable. So perhaps we see a data flow in this output, and you get to the point where it's exactly as it's required. And also the report is protected properly by authorizations, and I double-checked that only the really requested users have access to this report. So then you could say, well, okay, data flaw is identified, but it's exactly as required, so there's no real need to change the source code in here. We can document this in CodeProfiler directly. As you see here, we have the chance to set the status to a state which is called no issue, and also give documentation. So in here you see we can change the status to no issue and put any kind of reason. List of reason is also configurable, and as I said, we can add, for example, this data flow matches the requirement. So, and with the next CodeProfiler scan, we can then exclude these findings from the display, so it's the amount of findings reduces. Other activities which we could have would, for example, be perhaps you didn't know at all that this piece of data leakage is existing. Perhaps it's an old report which is 10 years old and was not used in the past, so perhaps retiring that report would be a good idea. Also, of course, reducing the amount of outputted data could be a good idea. So in my example, perhaps on that list, I do not need to have the phone number written to the file or sent via email, so perhaps I just remove it from being written to the result set. And then the data leak prevention finding would be gone immediately. And of course, as I mentioned a couple of times ago, we want to make sure that all of these data flaws are protected properly by authorizations. So perhaps we need to cover the two reports which I just used in my example with new authorization checks. And once we've done that, we could also again then go and set the status to no issue. Okay, so this concludes basically the live demo and also the explanation on how my project typically is running. And so I would like to ask Patrick to open up the panel again or repeat questions which might have occurred in the chat.
Yes, thanks, Sebastian. If there's any questions, please type them into the chat or the question and answer panel now. In the meantime, we've already had a couple of questions coming in. First one was regarding the runtime of CodeProfiler when doing a batch run.
Yeah. Well, runtime of CodeProfiler obviously depends on the amount of source code which I want to scan. But as I said, our average ERP customer, which we see in our project, has a little more than 2 million lines of source code. And we can scan these 2 million lines of source code within a data leak prevention project, I would say, in around 1 hour. So runtime of the tool itself is typically not really an issue.
Okay, thanks. I hope that answered the question. Next question is more on the content side. How many critical data can be defined?
Yeah. Again, I would say, well, this depends really on the type of system and the type of company, how big is it. But we had already customer situations where we investigated in an HR context, and the set of data elements for the sensitive data was defined in cooperation with on the one hand the HR module owners, but on the other hand also the Workers' Council in place. We had around 2,500 data elements we placed on that list. So I would say that's quite a bit already. But technically it's not really limited to any number, like you can only run 50 nodes. Yeah, depends on the project, and more than a couple of thousand, it should not be a problem.
Okay. This is all the questions we've had so far, but looking at the time, it's exactly 4:45. So if there's any questions you have additionally, oh, actually there's one question coming in, maybe we can answer that. The question is whether you can offer some sort of analysis prior to the actual project, so in terms of a risk analysis or similar.
Well, of course it's possible. I mean, just running the tool out of the box is pretty easy. You can also have it done prior to a project with something which we call the extraction scan, where the customer is just, he needs to extract source code running our code extractor, and then we can already have DLP checks executed on this code extract. Of course, then the question is still, for which sensitive data are we looking? And as I said, we have a predefined set of data elements, of course, ready, but typically we need to understand the business and the situation of the customer to do really a suitable project.
Okay. Thanks, and I believe this is the questions we've had so far, and therefore I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and thank you, Sebastian, for the interesting presentation, and if you have any questions, feel free to get in contact with us, and looking forward to the next webinar with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks as well. Bye.